It's your challenger coach Adam Moriarty Isles here with our newest Mobalytics tier list video for patch 9.14. This one was released a little later due to how large the patch was, so we could be as accurate as possible. Also, with how many bugs are coming out this patch, let me know in the comment section below which ones were the most game breaking that you found, as well as which champions you think got buffed or nerfed the most this patch. I am definitely not asking you guys to do this for me to lessen the amount of research I have to do for the update video, so let's jump right into top lane. For the top lane patch rundown, first up we have Renekton, who is gaining a shield breaker on his W when it's above 50 Fury. This is huge for him, as not only will it help him versus some top lane matchups like Riven, Rumble, or Sion, but it will also allow him to easily dive the backline and kill carries who have shields like PD, BT, or really any enchanter shield like Karma's, Janna's, or Morgana's, making him the premier backline diver. This prediction is a little bit reserved, but we are keeping him as an A+ champion on our tier list for now, but during the update he very well may make it to S tier. Kled received a buff to his Q where it now reduces healing if it pulls, which has the potential to swing a lot of snowbally matchups for him, such as the Darius one or the Aatrox one. Just like with Renekton, this buff will help him dive the backline during teamfights and will solidify his A tier placement. We also got changes to every Riven player's favorite champion, Poppy, who received an incredibly strong buff where her W now grounds and slows someone if it stops them from dashing. This means that champions like Ahri, Riven, Renekton can't just slam into the W and then use another dash afterwards to get away, which will allow Poppy to position herself to easily land a wall stun in those 2 seconds. This will move her to high B tier, as she is a fantastic counterpick to have in your champion pool, kinda like Kassadin. Aatrox lost his revive in favor of having higher healing and lower ult CD. This is just a slap to the face to Aatrox as a champion, especially with the addition of more anti-healing effects. He's going to be much worse in skirmishes, dives, and in teamfights, while slightly better 1v1. This change actually sparked the Aatrox community to rename him to Boris, as they can't even recognize the Darkened Blade anymore. That's just sad. Malphite received a mini rework, but the major aspects of it are that he will increase in size based off of his armor, allowing him to be a better meat shield in teamfights. His Q is now more fluid to use and has a higher slow percent but less duration, while his W is just an auto reset with a Titanic Hydra passive. So yeah, just Titanic Hydra. These buffs, in a meta that has immobile ADCs and a lot of bruisers in both solo lanes, will make him a great A tier pick. Singed literally got changed because Singed players complained that they couldn't tell they accidentally canceled Poison Trail in teamfights. You guys got one job, Singed mains. One job, and it was too hard apparently. Next up, a Swain rework. TLDR for this is that he gains maximum health from his passive now and some mana restore. He lost range from his basic auto attack and Q in favor of the bolt going through minions but stopping on champions, and his ult can be cast whenever now. These changes pretty much confirm that he's gonna be a top laner rather than mid lane or bot lane. Jace, Kennen, and Nico all got the same treatment. Because they were bullying top laners too much with auto attacks in the early levels, they got decreased base stats in favor of higher damage growth, making them less auto win early lane phase. The Urgot change is irrelevant compared to what they did to Tahm Kench. I know the community didn't really like him that much, but Riot absolutely murdered him in cold blood and took away the strongest and most important part of his kit, which was the ability to stack his passive and get damage off of it. In return, they gave him the ability to jungle slightly better, which might be a new home for him because he ain't a top laner anymore. Swapping over to the jungle list itself, we have Garen, Yorick, Urgot, and Mordekaiser in S tier. Mordekaiser did receive some nerf that will hurt him in top lane more than mid lane, but he was so strong we believe he will stay in S tier or at worst A tier. For A tier changes, we have Swain and Malphite moving up due to the new changes making them very suited to the current meta. Though we normally don't rank reworks, these ones are on a small enough scale that we felt we could accurately place them anyways. The last A tier change will be my pick of the patch, Tryndamere, who moved up from B tier. He is probably one of the most annoying champs to deal with when ahead due to his split push potential and that annoying thing Tryndamere mains do where they laugh and spin at the same time. And that thing that happens where he gets stunned and crits you while stunned 3 times anyways. Super fun. I'd normally give you a rundown on how to play this champion, but someone far better at it than me, called Fogged for the Win, a Challenger Chin 1 chick, just released a complete guide to Tryndamere matchups, so go check that out instead, and I'll leave a link to it in the description. I will say though that if you're currently looking for a counterpick to Alawi or really any tank, he is a great pickup, so try him out. Riot really shook up the top lane meta by graveyarding a bunch of champs due to massive amount of direct champion changes in this patch. These champs include Aatrox, Gnar, GP, Karma, and the hardest hit Tahm Kench, who are all leaving the list. I don't think a lot of people like playing versus Tahm Kench top, but in terms of balancing, I think he will remain problematic until he's actually balanced around one lane in particular. He was introduced as a top laner, then got moved to a support, then went back to top lane, and now he's some kind of jungle support abomination because he's bad at both. Just be decisive and give this man a lane to call home instead of trying to make him viable in 3 lanes, because it's clearly not working so far and he's just going to end up a 40% win rate champion. Onto the high elo top lane list, we have Kennen, Rumble, Riven, and Akali in S tier. Due to Akali's buffs this patch, we'll be putting her back in S tier as her damage potential is crazy now with her new E getting so much extra damage and ratios. Despite her alt CD going up, the constant trades that happen in top lane will suit her quite well and will make it easier for her to snowball and split push. I'd be extremely surprised if we didn't see her enter the competitive meta once again as a deadly flex pick between top lane and mid, because she snowballs even easier now in the early to mid game. Renekton is a champion that is borderline S tier, and we'll be watching him closely to see if he can make it during our patch update video next week. Speaking of Renekton, he's actually one of the primary reasons why Aurelia is moving down from S tier to A tier, as she's been performing worse in both competitive and high elo solo queue thanks to him and some other counter picks denying her a chance to snowball. Aatrox moved down to A tier and might even drop further if his revive impacts his teamfight potential too much, while Karma gets moved down to B tier from A tier after her previous nerfs, but might very well fall off the list altogether and follow TK into the graveyard. Seems like that support duo just isn't blessed by the solo queue gods to be good for more than a couple of patches. Starting with the jungle patch notes, Nidalee is the only real change with an increased base damage to her E, which will help her clear speed. This will make Nidalee mains happy, but really no one else. Moving to the jungle tier list, we have Vi, Amumu, Volibear, Master Yi, Jax, and Nunu in S tier. For this patch, A tier will be the only one receiving changes, with Sejuani moving down to B tier as she is just not performing well enough in the early game ever since her base stat nerfs. For Flaris' jungle pick of the patch, we have none other than the king of trolls, Trundle, moving to A tier. He says that Trundle is an exceptional counterpick to strong junglers such as Sejuani, Jarvan, and Nunu, just to name a few. Trundle Pillar plus W combo allows him to easily chase down and secure kills on immobile targets for ganks and 2v2 skirmishes. For item builds, he suggests rushing Tiamat for extra wave clear into Cinderhulk and Mercury Treads. If you're ahead, get a Titanic Hydra then full tank, but if you're behind, just skip the Titanic and start going tank immediately. Some extremely good tank items on him are Spirit Visage, Gargoyle Stoneplate, or even Knight's Vow if your AD carries Fed. Remember though, do not pick Trundle blind. He is a counter pick only, similar to Kassadin. If you try and blind pick him, you will pretty much be trolling your team instead of trolling the enemy team. Compared to the normal list, High-ELO Jungle has more changes, with Nunu, Rengar, and Nidalee being an S tier. With the buffs to her E, as well as a lot of new build options coming up like the hybrid Runic Echoes into Triforce build, Nidalee has been destroying solo queue, unlike Sejuani who fell from S tier to B tier. Like in the standard list, Sejuani took a big hit when she lost a lot of her base stats last patch, making her early game very vulnerable. This allowed strong invade style champions like Nidalee to completely dominate her and set her too far behind to even impact teamfights like she wants to. As for Olaf and Elise, they moved down to A tier due to matchup changes in the meta, as Olaf was feeding off of Sejuani for free wins, but could certainly make it back to S tier very quickly. Kayn and Skarner's AFK farm style just isn't cutting it in high-elo solo queue at the moment, so they were dropped down to B tier along with Trundle, who like Olaf was just stealing elo from Sejuani, who isn't as strong anymore and won't be that popular. A new challenger for an S tier jungle spot approaches, and it's Sylas, who has been seen destroying both competitive and solo queue alike. He may very well be an S tier champion due to his strong clear speed and gank potential, but I would like to see how having a magic damage shield will impact him in the jungle compared to his current shield, as it will hurt him a lot more than what happens in mid lane. At the very least, he is an A tier champion and is a great pickup for someone looking to add an AP jungler to their champion pool. Sylas' jungling is actually stronger than his mid lane once he hits 6, as he has way more options to use ultimates compared to mid. He can do things like steal a Sono ult from bot lane and then use it to go kill top lane, which isn't as much of an option for mid lane. First up, for the patch rundown for mid lane, we have Katarina getting her healing reduction increased on her ult, which is a nice buff, but I don't even think people have time to heal versus a fed cat, so this likely won't impact her too much. Next up, Fizz is going to have his passive reduce all incoming damage instead of just auto attacks, which is going to help his teamfight phase and laning phase versus mages, because everyone knows Fizz is currently struggling with survivability issues. LeBlanc's E will now reveal stealth once it roots, which will help her versus Akali and Talon in mid lane, but not much else. Ahri's E cancels dashes but has less charm duration. This is a crazy good buff, as her laning phase and teamfight utility went up a bunch. For those of you who might not remember, her charm was actually like this in the past and it made her impossible to gank if you were champions like J4 or Lee Sin, and not only that, some of her matchups are way easier now, like versus Fizz, LeBlanc, Akali. They're so much easier because you can just deny a large part of their combo. This is for sure gonna solidify her in S tier and may even make her a more competitively viable pick. Cassio got a lot of changes, and the gist of it is that she is now able to buffer her E, and she had some base stat adjustments that give her higher base HP, making her better against mages, but lower armor, making her worse against assassins. She also has no minimum cast range on Miasma, making it better versus melee champions, as well as decreased healing on Twin Fang early, but better during the teamfight phase. Overall, what these buffs do is hurt Cassio's laning phase to compensate her for a much stronger teamfight presence. Akali got extra base stats in HP growth and MR, more Q damage, W's invisibility now instead of obscure so True Sight sees her, WCD is 20 at all ranks, but the energy restore is 80 at all ranks and can no longer have its extended duration. The biggest buff here though is her E, as it does way more damage to compensate for her alt CD going up. Overall, what this means is that she is tankier, does way more damage, will max E second now, but because True Sight sees her in her Shroud, her teamfighting got way worse, which is more in line with most assassins. Aurelian's Soul Q will now grow faster and stun for a longer duration, while E no longer has any need to put extra points into it, as it's mostly a 1-point wonder spell now. It's a nice buff to him and might make the Space Dragon a more appealing pickup. Moving over to Diana, her passive bug to deal extra damage to turrets was removed, double R bug removed, W mana cost increased at later ranks, and Q speed down. As for how this will impact her ranking, I will be talking about her more in the mid lane section, so stay tuned. Galio is once again a mid laner, more damage on his passive and Q. Oh wait, they made his W interruptible and you can't flash taunt anymore, so he's probably still going to be bad, but more geared towards mid lane rather than support. To me, that's like removing Lee Sin's ability to ward hop. Like, what does Galio even do anymore if he can't flash taunt? Thankfully, Lux nerfs came through and the QCD went up at early ranks, while the W was nerfed on the base shield but has a higher AP ratio, while her R no longer has a reset mechanic but has a lower CD at later ranks, while also having a much higher AP ratio, which is pushing her more towards the mid lane rather than being a tank mage support. Ryze got some base stat increases and some bug fixes, but overall, the best thing that happened to him is being able to buffer his Q, kinda like the Cassio buff, allowing him to combo faster even with ping differences, but he's still garbage. Sylas got higher damage to minions on passive, way more Q damage with an increase to both his base and AP ratio, and his E is now a magic damage shield only and has a CD of 14 at all ranks, meaning it's maxed last, making it more suited for mid lane. His ult got nerfed on all fronts though, range, damage, CD, duration, meaning he won't be as insane in late game teamfights. What these changes mean is that Sylas will now be more of a mid laner and jungler rather than a top laner. Mordekaiser is losing a lot of damage on his passive, as well as 10% magic penetration on his E at max rank. This is gonna hurt him a lot, but because he's grossly overkilling people in mid lane, he might stay S tier or at the very least be A+. For the mid lane S tier, we have Malzahar, Vel'Koz, Mordekaiser, Ahri, and Lux. As for the S tier changes, we have Diana dropping way down to B tier. After her insane spike in win rate last patch, I decided to personally investigate why she was so strong and give her a shot myself, and found that it was impossible to miss her Q, that she had a ridiculous amount of bugs with her R, and that she was destroying towers way too fast and taking plates far too quickly. Now with Riot taking away most of these unfair advantages, Diana is definitely going to drop back down to B tier. Now, recently some people were speculating that Diana may have increased in win rate that much because of her matchups, and I'd like to kind of dispel that myth. For example, some people said that Qiyana is the reason that Diana's win rate went up so well because Diana's matchup into her is extremely strong. But realistically, that matchup only makes up 2% of Diana's overall games, meaning there's no way that Diana could have gotten an increase of 5% just from playing against Qiyana, even if she won 100% of her games. We also have some changes to B tier where Cassio, Galio, and Sylas, who got some mini reworks so to speak, are going to be added onto the list, while Swain is sent to the graveyard due to him being more streamlined towards top lane compared to mid lane. And lastly, for the pick of the patch, we have Peckinwolf's Lux. He says to go Electrocute, Taste of Blood, Eyeball Collector, Ultimate Hunter, and then secondary Mana Flow Ban plus Transcendence. And for items, you should go Ludens, Sorks, Morellos, Banshees or Zhonya's for defensive options, and Rabadon/Void for offensive options. He says that Lux will remain a top tier mid lane pick, as these changes were more geared towards making her a burst mage rather than a utility support. We have lots of changes for the high-elo mid lane list, but we'll start off with our S tier, which is Talon, Rumble, Katarina with newcomers Zed and Akali. On our last tier list video, while scrolling through some of our lovely YouTube comments, I saw a lot of people saying Zed is not A tier and he isn't that strong at the moment, which made me want to do more research on him. What I found out was that the viewers were correct and he was in fact not A tier. He was S tier, baby, boasting one of the highest win rates and play rates in Masters Plus with a massive amount of mains in both GM and Challenger. Like with Katarina, I think the incorrect perception of his strength comes from a vocal minority of Zed mains who just like to complain while casually sporting 60% win rates in Challenger with a supposedly bad champion. Akali also makes it to S tier based on a prediction that these changes are actually incredibly strong buffs as her damage potential went way up, allowing her to snowball more consistently even before the teamfight phase happens. We have a lot of minor changes happening in B tier and A tier, but I want to focus on Qiyana moving to A tier before I forget her. With the launch of TFT, many people forget this champion even existed, but pros certainly did not ignore her. She's being played quite a lot in scrims at the moment across all regions and has an amazing win rate in competitive so far. She's been destroying high-end solo queue due to her undodgeable 100-0 combo, so expect to see her picked up as a higher priority from now on. Despite the massive amount of changes this patch, only Jhin for some reason got changes for bot lane, with a buff to his Deadly Flourish CD going down to 12 seconds, as well as the root duration going up. These are some nice changes, but they're not really going to impact his ranking. As for the normal list itself, we have Jinx, Sivir, and Caitlyn still in S tier. You'll notice that we dropped Sonateric off the list entirely, as it's no longer face roll enough to win without being duo queued, so it really doesn't suit being on a solo queue tier list anymore. In A tier though, you'll notice we have a champion you may not have seen in a while, and that's Kog'Maw. With the meta being pretty melee or frontline focused, a marksman like Koggers can be extremely valuable, but normally isn't picked up because he's easily killed on his own, and so that's pretty harsh in solo queue. Thankfully for him though, a bunch of enchanters are meta at the moment, so in theory, they should be able to protect him so he can 1v9 teamfights. He's a lot stronger in lane than what you would think, especially versus low range carries that are popular at the moment like Sivir or Xayah, so give him a shot versus frontline heavy comps, you won't be disappointed. And finishing off the normal list, we have Hewitt's pick of the patch, Ashe. He says that Ashe has a new build, which is the Essence Reaver Trinity Force one. It's an expensive build that maximizes Ashe's CDR, allowing her to arrow much more frequently for picks and engages. It also gives her a lot of kiting power with frequent volleys and a constant move speed from Phage. When combined with Comet, Ashe's volleys become even scarier. This gives her good poke in and out of the laning phase, allowing her to more consistently build leads. Don't be fooled though, this new build is not a straight upgrade. It has defined strengths and weaknesses compared to the standard one. For the high elo list, in S tier we have Caitlyn, Kai'Sa, Draven, and newcomer Xayah. Sivir dropped out of S tier to A tier due to her previous nerfs really impacting her ability to auto push lanes and negate any lane interaction, while Jinx dropped down to A tier because of how skirmish heavy the current high elo meta is. Even though she can pop off in these kind of situations due to her passive, she more commonly just gets flanked and dies. Xayah will be taking their place in S tier, as even without Rakan, she is a powerful ADC when it comes to self-peel and kiting out melee style / dive comps, which is pretty much all anyone runs in high-elo solo queue at the moment anyways. Having an ADC who can peel for themselves in a meta where things like Akali, Aurelia, Renekton will be coming for that aesthetically pleasing Sandstorm Galaxy skin, it's extremely valuable when you can't rely on your first time Pyke support to help you. It's also pretty convenient that Rakan is an S tier level support who is popular, meaning you'll get to play Lover's Lane and pretty much automatically win the laning phase unless you get drunk off your own power and throw the lane. And now finally support. The first change we will see is to the robot Blitzcrank, where his ult is now an AoE shield breaker. Love this buff, because currently landing hooks on things like Lux feels bad because he just doesn't have the damage to kill them a lot of the times in lane, and then he just gets outscaled in teamfights anyways. Because of this buff, he can now be a hard counter to shield supports, so he's moving to A tier on the normal list. And expect to see a lot more off-roll Blitzcrank players like myself locking in the crank. Leona is getting a weird change where she loses all-in potential at 6 for increased tankiness on her W, which really doesn't make sense to me because I've never seen a Leona die in her W anyways. She normally dies right after it falls off, so I'm a little confused about this change. Karma and Morgana now have stealth reveals, which is a nice little buff versus certain champions like LeBlanc for example, but nothing too impactful. Kinda like the Alistar buff. Sure, he might be able to combo once or twice more during the laning phase, but it's not gonna magically increase his win rate by 5% unless a bug happens, which is definitely possible at this point in time. We have changes to Pyke that allow him to gain much more gold from his ultimate and stun minions again with his E. This change to his ult is really going to help him snowball in the early game and get his lethality items much quicker. This will allow him to really take over the mid game as well and be a true 1v9 style support, plus he's getting a new badass skin. This skin is so on point that it makes me want to make a tier list just for Riot Department so I can put the skin team in S tier. Next up we got Brad, Albardo, Bard, whatever you want to call him. He received a buff to his base HP helping him survive early all-ins, as well as a buff to his E in the early game, so we're moving him to A tier on the High-ELO list, and I'll talk about him a bit more during that section. Thankfully, Yuumi's early game got nerfed with her passive shield going down at early ranks and the mana restore being removed, while also nerfing Q's mana cost and base damage in favor of buffs to her E. This is going to make her more of a late game scaling support instead of a lane bully who also outscales you, which is totally fun to play against, especially paired with Caitlyn, Sivir, Ezreal, things that couldn't die. As for the tier list itself, in S tier we only have 2 champions, which are Janna and Nami, because they're just that much better than everything else in A tier. This happened because Lux support got completely destroyed, making her fall from S to B tier. She can still be played support, but it's gonna be much worse due to the shield being far less OP and rank 1 binding having 3 extra seconds on it. Best part about all this though is the increased AP ratio to her ultimate, meaning that she's more geared towards damage rather than utility, which means we will likely see more AP Lux supports again, and every ADC main is super excited to play with the Lux support who starts Doran's Ring all over again. For the A tier changes, we have Karma dropping down to B tier as her previous nerfs hit her hard, along with the fact that both Blitz and Pyke who counter her will increase in popularity this patch. Our final change to A tier will be Will's pick of the patch, Rakan. Rakan is a great champion that counters the majority of these top tier squishy champions like Nami for example. Whenever they try and step up and play over aggressively, he can just all in them with a W, as it's not that hard to land anymore. An early kill through this will be a great way to snowball the lane, and if their flash is down by the time he hits 6, he can just use his ultimate for another free kill. As an added bonus, one of his hardest counter matchups was Lux, and she's a lot worse than before, making it a lot easier for you to blind pick Rakan. Been a long video, but we finally have the S tier for High-ELO support, which are Janna, Nami, Yuumi, Rakan, and Thresh. There are lots of changes here, but the gist of it is that enchanters who are not Janna and Nami are taking a big hit, such as Karma going from S to B, Lux going from S to B due to direct nerfs, while Morg and Sona dropped from A to B due to being more situationally good compared to overall good at the moment. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, why is Morgana moving down when Blitzcrank is going to be more popular and so is Renekton, and Black Shield totally counters those champions? Oddly enough, Blitzcrank and Renekton will actually now be considered counters to Morgana because of the way that the Shield Breaker works. Shield Breaker will actually apply before any other status effects, meaning it's going to break the Morg shield completely and then either stun or silence, making Blitzcrank really good into Morg. Bard, after his buffs, is moving to A tier as he is the premier roaming support, which fits perfectly into a meta that has a lot of skirmishes. What was holding him back before is the fact that he just got all in lane, but with the extra HP, that won't happen as often. This type of playstyle can also take advantage of the fact that Janna and Nami are very popular, who have suboptimal roaming capabilities compared to Bard at the very least, and his E buff will help him do that even better. He's also strong enough to almost be A tier on the normal list, but me and the rest of the Mobalytics analyst team are hesitant to fully condone him in that bracket due to how playing him poorly can straight up troll your entire team and cause a lot more losses than intended by miss ultimates, baiting people to take your E, or even just stunning and missing and then dying. Last up, Thresh and Zyra move up a tier each as they both benefited from the high frequency of enchanters, as they can both snowball versus them quite easily. While Tom Kent, despite being gutted in the top lane, might see a small comeback in either the support role or the jungle, but don't seem surprised if you see him get dropped from the list real quick. Thanks again for watching our tier list video for patch 9.14. Feel free to ask us any questions in the comment section below for us to answer, and as always, be sure to check out mobalytics.gg and have fun playing TFT and League of Legends.